Hey, Sam, you come up with that intro line?
You didn't tell me that was today.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Writer's Room with Sam and Jim. This is the show where we bring aspiring writers into our writer's room to help them work on and develop their stories. And we're going to do that today with Mary Birdsong.
But first, we'd like to remind you about our live podcast at South by Southwest, which is sponsored by Blue Jeans by Verizon. This Thursday, March 18th at 1 p.m. Pacific time. You can watch us live on YouTube, and that link is going to be on our Twitter and Instagram at The Sam and Jim. Jim, ready to go off? What's on your mind?
The Shield. And not just, it's not a moment in The Shield. What struck me about that show, and it's been off the air for a while now, so not everyone's familiar with it. I know when we were first talking about this, JR had never seen it. But The Shield ran for a long time. It was on USA, I think, back in the day. Michael Chiklis was the star. Sean Ryan created it. And it was really cutting-edge cop TV for the time. It had that familiar cop TV thing. But it started off, or I should say, it's about a sort of special group inside the Los Angeles Police Department, cops who've been, sort of given special leeway to go have their own special unit to do stuff. And it starts with them committing a crime in the first episode. And
a crime, I think we should just say it's a murder.
Right.
Right,
So,
it's too far.
Right. It's heinous right off the bat. You go, oh.
And that was great, too, because how are they ever going to bring these guys back for a murder? This isn't cop porn where it's like, oh, they beat up a terrorist right before he was going to set off a nuclear bomb. They killed another cop in the opening thing. And I probably should have said spoiler alert, but this show's been off the air for about 10 years, so I think we're okay.
And it's just the pilot. So
it's just the pilot, yeah. But that was the original sin.
But that was the original sin, right? And somehow, in the years that show ran, I believe it was 6 seasons, might even have been 7, they managed to build not only great stories for all the characters that were in this unit, and there was several of them that really stood out. Walton Goggins was one of them, one of my favorite actors who's popped up here and there over time. But there was season arcs, and somehow at the end of all of those seasons, they finished the entire series in a way that came right back to that very first episode. Somehow they kept it alive the whole time, the issues that it raised and the threats and all the problems that flowed from that moment. And they got to the end of all those seasons and landed back where it was square one, finally coming home to roost.
I mean, that's a really, really hard thing to do. And now here's the question, though. Do you think that Sean Ryan planned that moment from the beginning? Or do you think, as we have often done on shows, come up with things down the road and realize that the fans are going to think that we planned this out? And we did. Which category do you think that goes in?
I think he had it planned.
All right.
I really do. One of the things that you and I do, because there's two of us, is we usually figure out, even when we're just pitching series or sitting down to break an idea for a series, is to figure out how does it end.
Yeah.
Because there's almost, if you're telling a good story, it goes somewhere. And once you know where it's going, you know what you're writing toward.
Yep.
And if you're good in TV, right, like you're going to go into a million side paths along the way, and that what that final destination looks like exactly might change.
It's a North Star, though.
Right.
I don't want to compare us to good writers, because, but in Haven,
few people do.
In Haven, we did that, and one of the scenes, it's not as beautiful as the Sean Ryan thing. I don't want to put it in that category, because his was tied to the original. Well, there is an element of it that's beautiful, but we did actually have one scene in the pilot that never changed, and the many drafts, and we wrote it for ABC, and we wrote it, and then we ended up writing for Sci-Fi, and this one scene never changed. And we always said, this could be at the end, and then it would be like this, and it was.
Yeah.
And it lasted throughout the whole time, and I was very proud of that, because it went to the central relationship, which was the central conflict of the whole series, and that's what Sean Ryan did so unbelievably well, and he did it before anybody. I'd never seen that before.
And he did it in, he made an anti-hero cop show, right? Where in episode 1 of the cop show, a cop commits a murder, and it ends with the cop being brought to justice, which is a real arc for a series. And it's the right arc. It's the story you want to tell. Here's the cop who's been, raised above the law.
Spoiler alert.
But he's not above the law.
Right.
And that's what you want that story to be, is you want justice to win in the end.
It was a beautiful, and also the first, and doing something for the first time and talking people into letting you do it for the first time, that is worthy of fanboy.
Okay, let's get into this week's show.
I know. I demand to come back on another future episode where I actually get to be in the garage. But I know for now I was like, can we do the phone? I'm scared.
No, it's totally cool. Totally cool.
All
Although we
fine.
found out coincidentally, JR and I both got tested this week, which was cool. And,
cool.
And Jim hasn't left the house in 9 months. So between that, I think we're feeling pretty good. All right. When we started talking about doing this, I thought about Mary right away because Mary's show that she talked about that she was working on in the class was so cool and so full of heart, but also funny. And Mary Mary's a comedian. So Mary, you're an actor.
I am. I'm an actor. I'm a multi-hyphenate. I'm an everythinger.
Now, why did you think to yourself, okay, I've got this really stable job of acting, so I'd like to go be a writer. I'd like to find something just as unstable as writing, as acting, or
Like, this isn't insecure enough. I really want to be neurotic and broke.
But why did you? Why did you want to write?
I think like right out of college, I remember I started auditioning, and I remember feeling like I just kind of didn't fit in at these like musical theater auditions for Fiddler on the Roof or whatever. Because I also sing, and I wanted to be in Les Mis, that was my thing. But I just was like, everybody here is so humorless, and they all. And I took an improv class, an improv like sketch comedy class, and that just was like, that said like all cylinders firing. And like still to this day, as much as I love acting or performing, when I'm performing in somebody else's script, because my background is so improv based, I have to really police myself and like respect that somebody wrote this.
Yes, yes, you do, Mary.
Please be the exception. Respect it.
So did you had all these ideas that you're acting and you're seeing scripts and you're thinking I wish I could rewrite this scene probably because everybody thinks that, including us, by the way. And then you thought, I'm going to sit down with a pad or a computer or whatever, and you're going to write. How was that day?
Wow, that's really going back there. I remember like in high school I had to write a play, and I got to dig that up because that is some gold right there. But I think it was like the Three Little Pigs, but it was Christmas. I don't even know. I'm just spitballing, guys. This isn't the finished product. But
The Three Little Christmas Hams.
right.
But I mean,
I remember like it was truly in that sketch class that we had to start like actually writing, dialogue and, stuff like that. It wasn't writing a TV show, but I remember it feeling really empowering, really freeing, exciting, terrifying.
has it ever felt that way since?
Oh yeah.
I feel like some days when I sit down to write, I feel like that those are the moments where the ideas either they're coming great, but I can't get them down on paper in any useful form, or they're not coming at all. And then I'm thinking, well, what do I do now? Right?
Oh yeah, I know and for me, I think, I don't know if this is like this for a lot of other writers, but I think for me, I basically consider writing like acting on paper or acting on a, keyboard. Because if I can lock into a character, then it's like surfing or something.
Inhabiting other people, really.
Yeah. But the downside of that is I always feel sort of insecure or challenged or whatever by the sort of the macro part, like the structural part, which Sam's class really helped a lot with. So I'm like, I just want to come up with funny bits.
Right, exactly. And a lot of people come in with, I've got a great idea for a scene, and which, by the way, when you're in a writer's room, that's the worst pitch ever. It usually comes from a junior writer of I have an idea for a scene, and by the way, that is a good idea when we're coming up with scenes. But if we're trying to figure out what the show is, or the season is, or the episode is, a scene, usually is the last thing that we're thinking about. I know when Jim and I were starting out, I was number one most guilty of that. Of like, oh, I've got a great scene, and Jim's like, yeah, so what? I've got a great lunch. What are we going to do here?
Right. It's a great scene. What's the movie?
When one thing that neither Jim nor I can do is act in any way. And when we used to act out our scenes to see if they, how bad they were, and it turned out they were bad. Yeah. But what was worse than the scenes was our acting, and I would occasionally slip into some sort of Scottish Jewish accent for no apparent reason. And by the way, we weren't writing anything that had anything to do with Scotland or Jews, but I would just go into it. So the thing that I think is so amazing about actors is that they are willing to suck in front of a crowd. And sucking in front of your writing partner or yourself, you're used to that. But in front of a crowd, it's impossible.
Oh, it's the worst.
So is it easier for you to look at pages that are terrible or your performance that's terrible?
Oh, both are so bad. But I would say pages, just really? Because I have less of my ego invested in, for me, it's like writing is sort of like frosting because I feel like I've already at least earned a living for a few decades acting, which is unheard of. But with writing, it's like, oh, but this is just something extra I'm doing just for fun. I'm not really serious. I'm not getting paid for it or anything. Isn't that cute?
Yeah.
So it's, in many ways, like I enjoy writing more than acting for that reason, because I don't have a lot of my ego in it. It's just kind of like, well, I know I'm shitty right now, so I want to just improve. And I'm not 100% shitty, but there's enough good there to pursue it. But I'm not nobody's waiting for that draft to send to producers, and if I don't deliver it, so there's less pressure to. But that said, I do want to get to that place where I can, in crunch time, just hunker down and deliver. In fact, crunch time is kind of my comfort zone. It's the time in between, that 11th hour deadline.
Right. It's hard to get motivated. It's hard to force yourself to do it. It helps to be, to know that someone's expecting something, right?
Yeah.
I think that's why Jim and I are partners, actually, still.
It's so helpful to know that someone's waiting for the pages, and it makes you actually confront it. Yeah,
they're coming. And, he's waiting, and I'm doing it. There's also a certain amount of showing off, too. If I am writing something, I know Jim's going to do it, I'm like, oh, I got to kill this. And... right. And then there's also the glory of, I can't figure this out. Could you do this? Because I have no idea what I'm doing, which you can't do if you're alone.
I wrote, I think this happened in class, I'm not sure, but I wrote my first feature script this year during quarantine, got paid and everything. And it was an adaptation, so that seemed a little bit less daunting.
Yeah.
But I was supposed to pitch the woman who asked me to pitch her for this rewrite thing, and I wound up pitching myself and one of my best friends because I knew she had a lot of expertise in this field. And it was so wonderful to have that every day, Monday through Friday. I knew I had to show up. It was great to have somebody's there waiting. Somebody gives a shit if I actually sit down at my computer today.
Yep.
It's like having
somebody
a personal
will yell
trainer.
at me if I don't. Yeah, exactly. So I really love, if it's the right person, which is so hard to find, I guess. I love the idea of working with a partner on stuff.
What you should do, if I have any advice to you, is you should just start with your college freshman roommate, and then you never have to make new friends. And it's all built in. Then
are you and Jim a college freshman roommates?
We are. Yeah. And so.
Well, I gotta call up Doris Zito. I wonder what Doris Zito is doing these days.
That's what I'm telling you. All right, so let's get into your what you're dealing with. So what are you working on? Tell us about that.
Part of what my challenge is I have so many ideas and so many things I want to write that it's sometimes hard to like hone in on, okay, I'm just going to focus on this one. That's why I loved having an actual like assignment, like that feature script, because I was like, well, I have to do this. Somebody's expecting me to finish it.
And whatever idea you're picking up and working on, every other idea is more appealing at that moment, right?
Right. It's like being the belle of the ball, right? And it's like, there's so many hot guys here. Oh my God.
Right.
Yeah. Until you take one home. And then you're like, oh my God, it's not a Sunday kind of love. And that's the problem. I'm with you.
So,
let me tell you, first of all, that Jim and I have the Red Book. Okay. And I think every writer has this.
Yeah.
And Jim's a little bit of a librarian in personality and in actuality. And he compiles every idea. And I swear to God, when I go into that book sometimes every couple of years, I don't remember them. I don't actually remember coming up with them. Like when we probably worked on them for a while.
And we sit down and talk, and they'll be like, "Oh, don't you remember we had this and this and this and this, and it turns this way and blah 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 blah." And he's like, "Huh?"
Wow. I was like, "Wow, that's a lot. We did a lot of work on that."
yeah.
Yeah. So I it's like running into somebody in the mall, and you don't. They're like, "Hey, Sam, how you doing? How's your daughters doing?" And they know their names, and I'm like, "Oh my God,
I'm so screwed."
Please, Lord, come to let the name come to me now. I know how you feel. We can talk about any of those, but that thing that you were talking about in class is pretty cool. And because let me can I pitch it back to you? Tell me how close I get. So you managed to take one of the most awful experiences of your life and turn it into a comedy, which I know is not unprecedented, but it was, the stories that was a situation where you just kept telling us stories. And I was just thinking, how the hell did we get this into a shape? And then I realized you were dealing with something that every TV writer deals with which is we have 42 minutes, right? Or if you do it as a half hour, you've got say 30 or 22, depending on network or streaming. And then it's a question of not just skimming the cream, but finding some sort of shape, and that is the hardest part. And that's what we want to talk about. So what's the pitch? How does this show work? How does this pilot work?
The way I envision it is one of the lovely details about my mom is that she didn't just have one funeral; she had two. Because
keep going. You got me so far.
And that's a true story. Because at the time, and this is part of the show, my two sisters were not talking to each other. And so they didn't want to be at the same funeral. So we had to have two on 2 different days, a week apart.
Right.
At the same location, by the way.
This probably starts before that, though. I'm guessing.
Well, but not necessarily. To me, the show starts with her funeral, her first funeral. And it ends with, I'm playing with time a little bit here. Like what the pages I started to write, I'm at the first funeral. And then as we're leaving, my other sister comes in for the second funeral. But I'm not sure about that.
That's
all that to say.
Great. Structurally.
The whole thing, the way I'm thinking of it is the whole show, like, takes place, which is, like basically my entire lifetime. But how do I put this? It's like shoved into this 3-month period where I went home to take care of my mother after she was given 3 months to live. Part of the challenge of the actual, like, real life story was this time it's going to be different. This time we're going to get along. This time she's going to be a normal, like, Leave It to Beaver, mother who organizes herself around her children. Within the show, I see the character based on me. She spent her whole life sort of saying, like, well, mommy's crazy. And, it's so crazy that she hasn't, like, yet become the mother I want her to be. And in the end, she realizes that the only crazy thing is expecting a 70-year-old woman who's got like 2.5 more months to live to suddenly change.
Right.
And like for me to say, I'm not going to love you until you become the kind of mother I want you to be, that's not love. And I think part of like the grittiness and the grossness of having to really, truly accept who she is, and I mean, right down to, you know, the shit in her bed that I was like throwing into garbage bags and fumigating the house. Like it was almost like by loving her on that intimate a level, I think it made me for the first time start to think that I might be lovable on that level.
Wow.
That's profound.
I don't know. I mean, that's not funny, but
Well, but the thing here that interests me, not knowing the story the way Sam does, because you worked on it in class together to an extent, there's something about having the two different funerals and having the two other women, your sisters, who are part of the story also.
yeah,
And they've each been clearly shaped in some way by that relationship where they can't be together, you know, at the outcome. And you're the one in the middle is what it feels like. And that's sort of interesting.
Totally.
That you're the one who winds up, you're sort of the survivor despite all the problems. You're the one who winds up seeing a path to eventually even loving yourself through this. And that's fascinating.
yeah. Thank you. And I think you're right because I'm the middle sister. I've always been the peacekeeper. My little sister Veronica calls me Switzerland.
Every
I'm
family
always
needs
like,
one. Every family needs one.
I'm always like, well, I can see Anne's point. I mean, but then again, mommy really doesn't want, you know, like all of this triangulation and yet, you know, I'm the one who went all the way to California and I'm the one who wound up going back.
All right.
To take care of her. And I didn't say this, but my one sister lives a half an hour away from her.
Of course.
And is a nurse.
Even better.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
And you're the actor writer who drove cross country to take care of your mom.
Right.
And at the time I literally was like just starting rehearsals for like The Boy from Oz and I was playing Judy Garland and,
Right.
you know, so.
Let me ask you, sorry to interrupt your incredibly
No, please do.
powerful life story, but let's get back to something important, television, which is, so obviously it's so clear why you're stymied, right? Because there's just too much good stuff. This is the opposite of many people's writing experience. When you're looking at a blank piece of paper and you don't know how to fill it up, you've got, you know, pad after pad after pad, but how do you actually take that down so you have one thing? So you have a show
Right.
and you only have 20, 25, 30 minutes, right? So
Right.
how do you do that? And how do you do that in a pilot? Jim, how the hell does she do that?
Well, Sam, you know, I think the problem is that that ball of yarn with the multicolored strands that you talked about is wrapped all around you, right? It's your life. It's you're in the middle of
Right.
it all. And I think for me, if thinking about it, I would treat it like a collage. I would start pulling out these moments and insights because I think if you started putting down the events, there's a story of I love the idea of a pilot story that starts with one funeral and ends with the other one, and maybe not even knowing the other sister exists until they show up at the end of the pilot, and you go, "Holy fuck! There's a whole nother layer to this family," right?
Right.
And that's interesting, right? Like right there, I'm interested, and if you can find your pieces of interesting story, I think you'll start to find the connective thread, right? If the theme of the whole series is the idea that you learn to love yourself by learning to love her in those last few months, and you're here at the funeral, then there's some piece of insight about that realization on your part that will string together 12 events or 15 events of that multicolored ball of yarn
Right.
that fold into what's happening in that funeral. What are you thinking back to? What are people talking about? What's coming up between you and the sister at the first wedding?
Okay, Mary, don't listen to a word he just said. Okay? It's all wrong.
And this is
Okay.
what our writing relationship
Well,
is
because
like
you
all the
just
time.
told her everything that she already said that. She's got a million stories. The question is, okay, the framing device is interesting. First funeral, second funeral. Okay, that part I give you. But all these other threads, we don't have time for that, man. We got 25 minutes.
No. I'm not saying you use all those. You write them all down, right? And then you find the 10 or 12 that link together on that thread of this is what made me. No, for the pilot, because you've got 12 2-minute scenes, right, in a 25-minute show, right? Whatever that is. So,
I'm not optimistic, man. First of all, Mary couldn't tell us the story in 2 minutes. There's no way she's going to do a scene.
So she finds 6 moments. No, but seriously, like, but you find the moments that once you pick the thread of what you want to say, there's going to be some moment that you realize, or that the other sister showing up answers at the end, and I think that's going to help you look at what are the events you want to string together and say first about this. That tells you why the sister won't talk to the other one. That tells you why that sister couldn't provide what you wound up providing for your mom. And why you were the person who had to be there, even though you sort of didn't want to be, I'm sure.
So I think what Jim's actually talking about is a writing tool that we use. It's like, what's the lens that we're going to look at through to see everything? And I think the thing that a lens does for you is you when you don't focus on it, it's not in your story, right? You could you have a scene, and you could look at it 5 different ways. So let's say there's a scene. There's the scene of you, helping your mother out of the bath, and you're seeing more parts of your mom than you ever wanted to, and she's, and that could be hilarious, right? And it could be, pathetic, and it could be miserable. It could be all those things at once. But the question is, what's the lens that you're looking at that scene, right? And that same lens could be the same lens for the whole episode, and yet have all these disparate scenes. But as long as we're looking at it through your lens, whatever that is, and it's one that you've got to pick, by the way. You can't pick 3. You got to have one just for the episode. It's not like that's it for the whole series. In the old days, I bet you would, because it'd be like, okay, well, this is my demonstration pilot, so it's got to be that way every time. But I don't think that's like that anymore, thank God. But I think you have that one lens, and you're the lens. Because this is, it's got to start with someone, right?
Right.
And it's got to be you.
And it feels like the conflict in the show is between what you wound up seeing in your mom at the end of that journey versus what you'd seen before, at some sense. And I think a funeral is a good way to open up those doors, because you have people talking about your mom. You have your sister talking about your mom. Your sister, in a way, and of course, in any scripted thing, you're not going to be it's not really you, and it's not really your sister, right? You're sort of both shining light on different pieces of the same story, right? One of you is saying X about your mom, the other saying Y. And in the conflict of those, you get story.
Yeah, and I have to say, Sam, it seems like such a small thing, but one of the best adjustments you gave me during class was, you're like, you got to change their names, Mary. And it really, it helped me see them as characters so much more easily than when I was just calling them like Mary, Catherine, like the names that they actually are. It just freed me up so much more to say, like, sure, that's what they did in real life. Forget that.
Right. And also,
what could they do?
Right. I wanted you to be able to lie about them. That's the most important. Because
you have to lie to tell the truth.
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's way too profound for Jim. But the thing about it that's really important is that we can change everything. And as long as we're emotionally true, we're fine. Right. But you don't even have to be emotionally true to the characters, to those women, your actual sisters, but you just have to be emotionally true to the characters that you've created.
Right.
And you have to make whatever's true about them shine a light on the truth about you, or the truth about the show that you are trying to speak to.
So I still don't know what the pilot's about yet, though. I mean, I don't really want to get boring. For me, this is the part where I say to Jim, could we stop with the philosophical talk? If we were breaking this.
You know what I'd say it's about?
Yeah.
It's about why the other sister was not the one who came and took care of her. Because there's an answer in what made it right for Mary and worthwhile at the end of it, rewarding at some, unexpected level at the end of it.
Okay. So then
Oh, yeah. I think, and this, I'm just guessing here. And again, it's hard to get perspective when it's your own life, but I think on some level there's a convenient piece to Mary's sort of martyrdom as far as her mother, like taking care of her mother goes. You know, it's like, well, I haven't married yet or had children or had a fifth date yet because my mother is crazy. Like, really?
Right. Right.
And yet my mom was in a relationship with a guy for 40 years, but she's crazy. She's the one who's, not, stable.
Right.
And so there's almost like whoopsie, like what happens when she's gone? Like, what's my excuse now?
Yeah, that's really that's deep and interesting, but I don't know how to make a TV show out of that. My question to you, I'm really trying to be lame here. I really want to bring this.
Please, it's good.
I want to bring this down to nuts and bolts lameness.
Yes, thank you.
Because these are all really interesting things that I would love to talk about while I work on a really tall bourbon and hear these stories. But to do a TV show, we have to be. I mean, we just need a structure. We need something or at least a through line. One through line, right? That then we can have offshoots, and that we're looking at that same through line through different offshoots, and that's cool too. But what's the through line? I like what Jim was pitching. I want to hear what you think, Mary, which is the idea that, first of all, if you're going to use the other sister, one of the sisters, I'd like to see her fail, and then I'd like to see you succeed in that same way that she failed. It's that simple, right? In a similar way, a way that is thematic to whatever it is you're seeing. And then when you succeed, it opens your eyes. It's not about your mother probably doesn't even notice, but it opens your eyes to, there's something else I could do here.
It's your two lives in response to your mother, right? You become two very different people, obviously.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's really strong. And there's an example, I think, that illustrates that. Like, at one point, the little sister, who's the nurse, came over and was like, no, I'm going to help out. I can do this. Mm-hmm. And there was like a social worker for hospice or whatever that came over too. And Veronica's sitting there. And like within 5 minutes, Veronica literally, my little sister, was yelling at my mother saying, you know what, you can go fuck yourself. Mm-hmm. I don't care if you're dying. I am out of here. I'm really sorry you had to hear that, nurse lady. Like, just like, and
I love that.
She was gone.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great.
I love that.
Yeah.
And
that she's the nurse.
And she's the nurse, but I don't look down on her for that because your mother was a piece of work. And by the way, one of the biggest fights I ever had with my wife, this is going back 12 years or something, but was when I was driving her home from chemotherapy. And I know. And I was in the car and we pulled over the car and, she's bald. She's got her kerchief. And then I am the monster who is just pissed. And, I don't remember what the specifics of the fight, but obviously it was about this pressure that we had been in together. And we had this fight. And I remember her saying, well, I don't understand how you can be mad at me right now. And I'm like, well, when am I supposed to be mad? It's either the 5 days a week, 5 days that you're feeling good, or it's the other days that you're feeling terrible. And I don't want to be mad in either one, but we've been doing this for 4 months. I got to get mad sometime. And,
right.
And that was not fun, but it was great for the writing. And because it comes down to this, that we're both things at one time. We're inappropriate people, everything's inappropriate.
And there's something about like living in that tension between you and the character of Veronica, in the pilot, that then whatever you find within that relationship to make an arc out of for the episode, dealing with your mom and dealing with each other, then you add in another sister we don't even know about at the end of it, is fantastic, right? Like that becomes the question is, wait a minute, there's another layer to this that we haven't seen.
All right. Now I can see why you can't write this thing. You have too much material and it's just impossible. This is what's driving you crazy, isn't
it? It's great because this is family, right? Like this is all the strands that connect everyone as you wind up reliving the same stuff over and over again in different forms of these,
But we're supposed to be helping her break her pilot.
Yeah, but it's great.
Sorry.
No, I can see these stories. I mean, they're amazing. I mean, I've heard a couple of them before, and they're still amazing. And so, but the thing is, how do we make that into a TV show? So if the structure is we start at the funeral, and then we're doing flashbacks. Even if there's another funeral, then that means this whole show is flashbacks, though, right?
Oh yeah, time is very bendable.
Yeah, I think that's kind of great.
Okay.
I sort of like that as a tool.
So then, I think the structure can be really simple. Can it just be her moving into her mother's house? Or is it, and then while she's in this timeline, we're seeing the flashbacks from when she arrived and all the stuff that happened, or earlier. Or earlier than that. Now we don't have a lot of scenes here. We have, if it's a half hour, we've got 15 scenes, and that's not a hard rule, by the way. They're always how long is a scene? Well, it could be 2 pages, it could be half a page, it could be 2.5 pages. Who knows? So it's not, but we don't have a lot of real estate, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's something in this that makes me feel like the real story here at all levels is about recognizing your mother and yourself, and recognize your mother and your sisters, right? Like,
you want to do that in the pilot? You wanted to recognize that in the pilot in a couple ways?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it feels like that's what the building block of the show is, right? It's about, because there's something about acceptance, right? Like, as you said, this experience with hospice with your mom led you to a point where you could love her despite the fact that she's not the person that you always wanted her to be. And there's a profound recognition of humanity and how fucked up we
right. And also,
really
I feel this is something I feel, and again, this maybe not breaking it down, but something I feel kind of passionate about that I learned, I think, from taking care of my mom, is I feel like my whole generation has been fed a line of bullshit, which is, well, how can I really love you when I don't even love myself?
Yeah.
And it's like, I've got to learn to love myself first. And it's like, fuck you. How about you learn to love somebody else? And then you'll feel loved. Do you know what I mean?
Well, there's
and
your
I
show.
feel like,
That's your theme right there. That is what the show is about.
What's the show about?
Yeah.
The show is about fuck learning to love yourself, learn to love someone else, and you'll find out how to love yourself.
Because I feel like it's a generational thing. Like, my mom grew up in, the shadow of World War II, when they were like, how about you, roll up your sleeves and get to work and, do something for somebody else, God damn it.
So
whereas our generation was like...
Is the show then watching, Mary, what's your fake character name? That's really you.
Right now it's Robin.
Okay, so is Robin, do we want to instead see her fail at relationships, which has got her here?
Yes.
And then see her have one small success with the mother in maybe post-mortem or not, either way. And that's when or I wouldn't be post-mortem, but it would be with her mother. And that's how we're seeing, the key to unlocking Robin's happiness from all these years of unhappiness or inability to have a relationship is her having one success with her mother. By the way, in the face of her mother being an unpleasant human being.
One insight from her mother that throws a lens on the way in which Robin was unsuccessful herself in the past, right? Because this is about how mothers build their children, and it's about how children respond to that, and then it's about seeing through, what you were trained to think to see what the truth of it is, right?
Right. That's cool.
Right.
I'm going to go back. For me, the two fundamental pieces of your story that have come up for me that make sense are, you talking about what's going to be your excuse now that she's gone for why relationships don't work, and your realization at the end of taking care of your mom that actually showed you how to love her despite who she really was. That's A to Z to me. Like, that's an equation.
Well, okay.
Right.
If that's the equation, what's the pilot? Says Sam. The thing that we're trying to figure out now, based on everything that Jim's talking about and that you guys were talking about, the idea of relationships with men and relationships with your mother and how they tie.
And your sisters.
And your sisters.
And yourself.
Well, I think we're saying yourself is the one that we're saying we have to give the external ones first, right? And they're kind of a look into that. And all I'm trying to do is keep knocking things off the table because you got too many things on your table. It's almost like when I write, I have to clean the house and everything. Right. And Jim's kind of used to me pacing and sweeping. And when we work at my house is immaculate because I can't think if there's too much. And it's in this case, this is driving you crazy, which is there's just so much stuff. And the last thing you can do is break a series. You have to break a pilot. The pilot is the thing. That story is the thing. And once then when you're sitting in a meeting with executives, they're like, well, where else is this going to go? Then you can be like, oh, there's this story, and they're howling, and that's great. But there has to be that pilot. And it's the hardest thing to write is a pilot. Back when you could write just a sample of some other show, that was great. Jim and I wrote a fantastic West Wing. Back in the day, because, Aaron Sorkin had already done the heavy lifting and said, this is what the show's about. And these are the characters. So my question is, what is this pilot about?
I wonder if it's accepting your sister if we're introducing one sister at the first funeral and we're coming to the end, like there's a reason why that sister was not able to go take care of your mom. And
Right.
if the lesson from your mom, and we're pulling up to TV land here, not real life, right? But if the lesson from your mom was to love people for who they are and not who you want them to be, then the story of the pilot is learning to accept your sister who left you with the task of taking care of your mom, and you're there at the funeral together. And what are the pieces that shaped the puzzle so that she could not be there, and yet she's showing up, and you're there, and you're the person who did take care of her, and you're realizing at some level that that's okay, or you love her anyway, or you can't fucking stand her now because she couldn't do whatever it is, right? But it's getting to that.
Yeah, I do remember. I'm just bringing this up because I think maybe this illustrates what you're talking about, if it's usable. That at one point, post funeral, I remember realizing through dialogue with my little sister, she assumed that my mom and I got along really well, that it was easy for me.
Why? Because your relationship was so much better than hers?
Because I was sort of like, well, Mary is the performer and the artist and the blah, blah, blah. And she's been in a movie with George Clooney. And so she thought that my mom just adored me, and we just sat around like talking about, sunshine and moonbeams. But what happened was I mentioned like that I would like try and like clench my teeth and not lose my temper with my mom, and then literally go in the bathroom and be like, you fucking crazy cunt, you fucking cunt. And that's what I needed to do to not lose it.
Right.
And to not be a horrible person to my mom.
Whatever
so when I told my little sister that, and this was very sweet of her, she was like, oh my God, Mare, really? I had no idea. Like I didn't know your heart was that big. And it made me feel pretty great. But I think there's something to that of like, I don't know if that's too like, I don't want, it's like, I don't want to pat myself on the shoulder. Like I was mean to my mom while I was there, but.
Well, I think the fact that you are there and you are in the mess, Robin is there and she's in the mess,
right.
That's the singular.
The actions speak much louder than any words, right?
Yeah. And the fact that you're in there and then you run into a bathroom after she's been terrible and you yell about her, I think everyone is going to identify with that in 2 seconds. And so that's great, right? I mean, that's a structure right there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And can I ask a question? Originally, because again, this was a solo show at first, originally in the script, this show had these sort of heightened sequences where I would sing, where like if I was in the bathroom trying to like get my mother out of the tub or get her off the toilet or something, all of a sudden like the bathroom would open up and it would be like a variety show and I'd be singing Mother's Little Helper by the Stones, and like there'd be a band in the shower with us.
Of course.
Like, you know what I mean?
Of course there would be.
And like fully clothed, but we're all just like playing a great song, And
well, that's great.
So,
but hold on,
it's weird.
You might have mentioned that a little earlier. I feel like that's an important aspect of the show. But that is spectacular.
It's spectacular.
I mean, why not?
Why not?
Yeah. But then if you do that, all right, that's going to take up some real estate, right? And you see where I'm going. I don't know how I turned into the accountant on this discussion. But I'm like, everybody, we got $100 to spend. Okay. So it's beautiful.
This could be an hour long. It doesn't have to be.
Sure. Whatever it is. So, okay. So it's 45 minutes. But the point is, that's great. That's a signature move. It's the internal life. We've seen that before, but not in a.
It's a little my crazy ex-girlfriend, except it's my crazy dying mother, right?
Right.
Which is way funnier.
Funny.
Which is way funnier, right?
My crazy dying narcissistic mother.
Right.
I love it.
Who I hate.
Greenlight that shit.
Who I hate / love. That's great. Okay, so that's the internal life. So
yeah,
Mary, I mean, there's so many. I mean, the show's right here, right? So what's driving you crazy? Is it too many? It's too many good ideas, obviously.
I think it's like you said. It's like just getting, because I go so to the, you called me out on this too in class, not even in a bad way, but I go to the minutia. I go to the like, what does the lace look like on the sofa? You know what I mean? It's like, who gives a shit? Just like, what happened in the pilot?
Yeah. Going to the lace, by the way, that is the best writer masturbation ever. Right. Because we can sit there and worry on that. If you've ever talk to a bunch of sci-fi geeks, I mean, they will go, and Jim and I are definitely in that group. We will just talk about stuff that doesn't matter because we're fanboying out, and that's cool. That's fun.
Right.
But yeah, you're not going to break a lot of television that way. So let's decide now.
Yeah. I mean, I think if it's you and your sister and that relationship and how the realizations you're both having there at that funeral with each other. I mean, there's something about you yelling in the bathroom and her being high as a kite wanting to put her cat down that sort of intercuts or plays off of each other in a really fascinating way. And it's both of you reacting to this moment, which is a funeral, which is huge, and your relationships with your mom and what you thought about each other and about your mom and the assumptions. And so there's a lot there.
And your sister makes it present day. So the present day story, if you start with the funeral, that's an important story. And then you can go back and your sister can be in there too, and you're watching. So now the story is really about these two sisters and their mother.
Right. And the realizations playing out forward, backward in time as you go. And then you get to the end of that story and there's been a realization and a bit of and it doesn't have to be big, right? I don't think this is the kind of show where you have to have
end of what story?
At the end of the pilot. Right? I don't think it has to be, earth-shattering revelations. It can be even small things about like her not realizing that it wasn't sunshines and rainbows for you, right? Like, right? Like that's a moment.
And that's the end.
And then there's another sister, right? Like,
well, okay. I'm saying the reason that can be the end is that's a question. Right. That's a realization. And then you realize, oh my God, these people are going to learn so much about each other.
They didn't even, she didn't even know that.
Right. No idea. And you got to end on a question.
Yeah.
Right. And now I know what the show is about. It's about you and your sister learning about each other. By the way, learning about yourselves with your mother and building a relationship with your sister that you never had and really it's about loving, you already knew how to love your mother. It's about learning to love this sister.
It's almost like your relationship with your mother is the lens that is being put on every other relationship in Robin's life. Right. It's the lens through which it's being seen.
It's she is like the ocean that I'm swimming in, and I'm a fish. Like I feel like your mother is. You can't even see the influence that your mother is still playing out on you in your life. The way you interpret everything. Right. It's paradigm. I don't know.
Does the idea of it being about the sisters make it easier for you or smaller for you or bigger?
I think it does. Okay. I think it does. I do think the relationship, like Mary's inability to like be, in a relationship will eventually also be a part of it because also these two sisters are married, they have kids, whereas it's almost like instead of having a family, I have this relationship with my mother who's across the country. Right. So I think there's a piece of that. And also and this again was true, the three sisters who weren't talking, two of them not talking to each other, we had this wonderful moment where we all wound up like sitting in my mom's hospice bed right after they fucking took her body away. We were on that bed, curled up, blankets, pillows. We were watching Call the Midwife, which is about nurses.
And
my
birth.
Mom's favorite show.
And birth.
And birth, and we were like eating like meatball hoagies from Wawa, laughing, crying, farting. Like we so needed each other. And yet, they weren't even talking enough to go to the funeral like a day ago. Right. So I think
that sounds like something from the second episode to me. That looks like the end of the second episode, right?
Yeah, maybe you're right. But I do like that idea of like them discovering, you're not necessarily who I had you pegged as. Right. Maybe you're not just Switzerland. Maybe you're not just, the sort of rock and roll little sister nurse who goes to Guns N' Roses concerts, know.
And it feels like at the macro level, that's what Robin discovers is that Robin isn't who Robin thinks she is.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, no. Shut up.
No, but I think so. I mean, I think that's...
Don't listen to him. Don't listen to him.
Makes it serious.
Nope.
It's Robin finding Robin.
Mary, I hope we haven't messed you up too much.
No, not at all.
Okay. I Those are all beautiful stories,
They are.
and I'd like you to throw as many of those out as possible. And Jim would like you to include as many as possible, which, by the way, kind of defines.
Which is how it gets on HBO.
Well, I mean, I think it starts with the funeral. It ends with the second funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And it, like I said, it jumps back and forth in time.
And it's and who's it about?
It's about Mary and her mom and her sisters.
Yeah, I don't think it's about the mom. That's the funny thing. Of course, the mom's going to be in there. There's a lot of mom stories, but we're talking about that lens. If you make it about the mom, then I think it's about Mary and her sister, which I may be thinking.
Right. For the pilot, the pilot story is Mary and her sister, Robin and her sister.
And her sister. I don't know if you've watched Hillbilly Elegy, the Ron Howard movie on Netflix.
Oh, no, but I need to. That got such a crazy, response.
It did. And, the book was very interesting. But the thing about the movie is a lot of characters, and there's a crazy mom in there. I mean, a very difficult mom, a drug addicted mom who's got all sorts of issues. But it's not about her; it's about her son. And the thing is, we're learning a lot about her. But I'm the son is who's bringing me into it, and he's my center. And
right.
I think anything that doesn't serve that center is got to go, because it's not because you have so much. So we don't need all of that. So if it's we're staying with him most of the time, or with you most of the time, then of course we're learning about the mom, and of course we're learning about the sister, but it's all relative to you. If it doesn't serve your story, then it's just extra story.
Right.
Right.
The mom is the ocean, but it's about the fish.
Yeah.
That's what we care about, is you, the main fish, bumping into the other fish and having revelations and
Maybe a
understanding.
7 on that metaphor.
I was using her metaphor.
Oh, that her metaphor? Then it's a 10. I apologize. It's a 10. Mary, you're awesome. Thank you so much.
And that's all we've got for you this week. Our producer, J.R. Zamora-Thal, is working the mixing board.
Our logo was designed by Julien Debar-Monclair, and our music was provided by Bouderays out of Austin, Texas.
If you want to get in touch, we are at The Sam and Jim on Instagram and Twitter. And you can find us on Facebook and YouTube as The Writers' Room with Sam and Jim.
And if you like hanging out in the room with us, give us a follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And tell a friend, would you, so we can get JR paid. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.